feel like we need to both adjust our cameras because I feel like I'm super tall compared to you.
All right, I'll go back.
I would have to get my ceiling.
There we go.
There we go. Now we're eye to eye at least.
All right, now I'm seeing the the shirt. All right. We're gonna start. Well, do you want to do the intro?
Yeah. Do we have a real intro, or are we just introducing our beers? I forget what we do.
This is just like this is Media Endeavor. I'm Meeky.
Hey, I'm Matt. All
right, we're our third episode. We're just kind of like doing that all. Introducing our drinks first. I am drinking. I don't know.
Strawberry lemonade.
Surfside strawberry lemonade vodka seltzer.
I gotta hold this with my left hand because this is left hand brewing. The Belgian White Nitro. I gotta represent Colorado brewing all the time, apparently.
Yeah. I'm just gonna be sassy and put it in a cup.
Oh.
Alright.
So this is a good summer beer. This might as well be summer.
I'm
sure it is for you.
It's going to be tomorrow. Yeah, it's 90 something degrees this week.
Oof. No, thank you. 70s here. I'll take that.
Yeah. So today we're actually going to test something different. So we wanted to do a debate with AI about the topic that we I don't know. It's something that we always talk about, but it's like we want to see how we can make it more intellectual, educational with arguing with the AI.
Yeah, because I mean, what else does anyone need but yet another way to use AI to do almost nothing?
Right.
So we're going to prove probably nothing with this call, but maybe we're gonna learn something. So I want AI to convince me that a headless CMS approach is going to be the way to go for a digital media site, regardless of the implementation. I think most people know how I feel about it. I am not pro headless decoupled for any site, every site, right? I know the use cases. There are some. They're small and pretty far and few between for the most part, especially as a platform for publishing. But let's see what we're going to go with Grok, right?
Yeah, we're going to
see if we can get it to yell at us a little bit.
Let's see, because I'm trying to figure out with the desktop version on the browser version, it doesn't look like they have a voice enabled. So yeah. I'm going to give them the direction and then switch over to the app on the phone since I have the voice. Then I can do that. So quickly share a little bit. So that's what I put as an initial prompt. I want to have a debate about headless CMS for digital content media publishing site. Publishers, not publishing site, right?
Yeah, either way, should be fine.
Yeah. You are a senior developer who is a proponent of headless. You believe the headless CMS is the way to go. We do not agree with it. We want this to be a conversational so we can go back and forth. So I'll start that.
All right, they already lost me.
That's a lot.
All right, so it's probably going to say, all right, practical examples, contentful or strappy, push articles, okay.
Okay, so I'm going to switch to voice mode on this, on my phone. And I'll just unshare. Well, I'll keep it on and see if that changes on the screen as well. Okay, that was a long information. Can you summarize it and give me the synopsis of what you just said?
Sure, I'll keep it tight. I'm advocating for Headless CMS because it gives media publishers flexibility, scalability, and future-proofing. It decouples content management from the front end, letting you deliver content to any platform, web, apps, or new tech via APIs. This means faster adaptation, better user experiences with modern frameworks, and seamless integrations with tools like analytics or ad platforms. Content teams get an intuitive interface, and developers get freedom from rigid templates. What's your take? Why aren't you sold on this?
So is she listening?
Yeah.
So you're basically telling me that a bunch of jargon and keywords is why we would use a headless, because there's no difference between using an API in WordPress to deliver all those different tools. I mean, obviously you can use React; it's part of the system.
So what's your thoughts on that?
I think you're testing me to see if I'll bite. You didn't share your stance yet. I'll assume you're still skeptical about Headless CMS and nudge the debate forward. My core thought is that Headless CMS is a game changer for media publishers because it solves the rigidity of traditional systems. You can push content anywhere, websites, apps, even emerging platforms, without being tied to a specific front end. This adaptability keeps you ahead in a fast-moving digital landscape. Plus, it streamlines workflows, editors manage content easily, and developers build custom, high-performance front ends with tools they love. Scalability is another win. Handle traffic spikes or new integrations without breaking a sweat. But I'm curious, what's your hesitation? Is it the learning curve, setup costs, or maybe you think traditional CMS still gets the job done? Give me something to work with, and let's keep this debate rolling.
So it's all of three that you mentioned, actually. So the traditional CMS can do a lot. People just don't research enough to do this. And also the setup cost alone is higher because you have multiple integration points and multiple applications that you have to build, as well as the maintenance cost, and then the resources that you have to put in to maintain all these different applications. And there's a lot more breaking points in the integrations that is not necessary. So what do you think about that?
You're bringing up solid points. Cost, complexity, and maintenance are real concerns, and I'm glad we're digging into them.
What else is there?
Let's tackle this head on. First, on traditional CMS doing enough. I get that systems like WordPress or Drupal can handle a lot out of the box, especially for straightforward websites. They're battle tested with tons of plugins and templates, but they often hit a wall when you need to deliver content beyond a single site, like to apps, wearables, or new platforms. The tightly coupled nature means you're often hacking plugins or custom coding workarounds, which can get messy fast. Headless CMS, by contrast, is built for multi-channel delivery. With APIs, you create once and publish everywhere, which is critical for media publishers chasing audiences across devices. Sure, you might need to research to max out a traditional CMS, but Headless simplifies that long-term by centralizing content and reducing platform-specific tweaks. On setup costs, I hear you. Headless can feel pricier upfront. You're not just picking a CMS, you're building custom front ends and integrating APIs, which means more initial dev work. But think of it as an investment. With a traditional CMS, you might save initially, but you're often locked into their ecosystem, paying for premium plugins, themes, or hosting to scale. Headless CMS like Content Temple or Sanity often have tiered pricing that can start small and scale predictably. Plus, once the API integrations are set, adding new channels, like a new app or voice assistant, is way cheaper than rebuilding a monolithic site. For media publishers, where content needs to hit multiple touchpoints, that flexibility can save serious cash over time. Maintenance and breaking points are a biggie. Yes, Headless has more moving parts: APIs, front ends, hosting. That can seem like more places for things to break. But in practice, the decoupled architecture reduces risk. If your front-end framework needs an update, your content backend stays untouched. With traditional CMS, a single bad plugin update can crash your whole site. Maintenance for Headless can be streamlined with good DevOps use, cloud hosting like Vercel or Netlify for front ends, and lean on the CMS provider's infrastructure for the backend. Also, modern API standards like GraphQL are robust, reducing integration failures if you set them up right. For media, where uptime and speed are critical, This separation can mean less downtime, not more. You're right that it demands skilled resources to manage those integrations, and that's a valid hurdle. But the trade-off is you're hiring for modern, in-demand skills like JavaScript frameworks, not niche CMS expertise that's harder to find long-term. And once the system's humming, content teams can often manage updates without devs, freeing up resources. Here's my pushback. Traditional CMS might feel simpler and cheaper initially, but it locks you into a rigid setup that struggles with modern media demands. Headless spreads the cost and complexity upfront, but pays off in agility and scale. What's your take? Do you think the short-term savings of traditional CMS outweigh these long-term gains? Or is there a specific breaking point you're worried about blowing up? Let's keep going.
I think is she listening to me? I think you basically like to hear yourself talk. All you're doing is regurgitating marketing and other material that's already available on the web. And you're also confusing headless CMS versus SaaS plus a decoupled architecture. I think what we'd want to talk about, if we want to talk about SaaS, that's one thing, because then you're talking about that by using WordPress or Drupal, you're going to be somehow constrained upon its system versus a SaaS system. I mean, you're completely constrained. You can't do anything outside of what their product roadmap is going to be versus an open source system where you can do anything you want. So I don't understand the constraints there. You talk about a headless being the ability to deploy to multiple things. Well, that's exactly what WordPress does, what Drupal does. They have an API system. So I don't think you're actually talking about benefits. You're just talking about marketing material for what people say headless is good for, and not actually thinking about the actual details of where it is different.
So, picking up where we left off, specific breaking point you're worried about blowing up, I'm guessing you're asking for more details on where headless CMS might falter, especially since you mentioned integration breaking points. If I'm off, just clarify and I'll pivot. Here's the deal. You're right that headless CMS has more components, APIs, front ends, hosting, which can feel like more potential failure points. Let's break it down.
It is.
The main areas
It's more.
are API reliability, front-end, back-end sync, and developer errors. API reliability is critical since the headless CMS delivers content via APIs, like REST or GraphQL. If the CMS provider has downtime or rate limits, your content delivery could stall. But reputable providers like Content Temple or Strapi have solid SLAs. 99.9% uptime is standard.
99.9 is nothing. You need an extra 9.
Mitigate this. Compare that to a traditional CMS, where a server crash or bad update can take your whole site offline. Headless isolates the risk. Front-end, back-end sync is another spot. Since the front-end is separate, misconfigured APIs or
99.9 is 8 hours a year
display
of downtime.
Or not at all. For media publishers, this could mean articles not loading on your app, bad news. But this is less about the system and more about setup. With proper testing and versioning standard dev practices, you minimize these hiccups. Traditional CMS isn't immune either. A plugin conflict can break your site's layout just as easily. Developer errors are trickier. Headless demands devs who know modern stacks, JavaScript, APIs, CI/CD pipelines. If your team flubs the integration or skips documentation, maintenance gets messy. But this is where Headless shines long-term. You're using universal tools, not proprietary CMS skills. Finding React devs is easier than finding Drupal experts in 2025. Plus, with the system set, content teams can often update without touching code, reducing dev dependency. On your cost concern from earlier, Headless might seem like a beast to set up, but costs stabilize once integrations are built. For example, a media publisher could spend $20 to $50K upfront on a custom Headless setup, depending on complexity. But ongoing maintenance is often lower than traditional CMS, where plugin subscriptions and hosting upgrades stack up. A case study from the Washington Post, which uses a custom Headless setup, showed they cut content deployment times by 50% across platforms, saving on dev hours long term. Now, you mentioned traditional CMS can do a lot with research. True, but the effort to customize a monolithic system for multi-channel delivery often matches or exceeds Headless setup costs without the scalability. If you're worried about specific breaking points, like a particular integration failing, can you pinpoint one? Or is it the overall complexity that feels like too much? Throw it at me and let's keep this debate rolling.
Well, for one thing, the uptime that you're mentioning is really high because I think Matt just mentioned, that was a 99.1%.
99.9 is about 8 hours of
That's a
downtime a
critical
year.
piece for media publishers, and I'm glad you caught that. I mentioned 99.9% uptime for reputable headless CMS providers like Content Temple or Strappy, which is solid but not perfect. If Matt was pointing out that even small downtimes can be a deal breaker for a news outlet, where every second of outage could mean lost readers or ad revenue, I hear you. Let's unpack this. With a headless CMS, the API is the lifeline. If the CMS provider's servers hiccup, your content delivery to websites, apps, or other platforms could stall. For instance, a 0.1% downtime, about 8 hours a year, might sound minor, but for a high-traffic media site, that's real money and trust lost. However, most top-tier headless CMS platforms mitigate this with global CDNs and edge caching. Your content gets stored closer to users, so even if the main server wobbles, your audience might not notice. Compare that to a traditional CMS like WordPress, where uptime often depends on your hosting provider. A shared hosting plan might promise 99.9%, but can buckle under traffic spikes, like during breaking news. And if a plugin or theme update goes sideways, your entire site, front end and all, can crash. Headless avoids that by decoupling. Your front end can stay up even if the CMS backend has a brief blip, especially with cached content. Now, I'll concede. If your headless CMS provider isn't top-notch, or your team skimps on redundancy like fallback APIs, you're exposed. But that's a planning issue, not a flaw in the headless model. For example, The Guardian uses a headless setup and reported near zero content delivery disruptions by leveraging AWS and robust API retry logic. You mentioned Matt flagging this. Does he have a specific case where uptime tanked with headless, or is it more a general worry about relying on APIs? And since you've hit on cost and complexity before, is uptime your biggest sticking point now, or is there another angle, like maybe the effort to set up those redundancies? Give me a bit more to chew on, and let's keep sparring.
So the redundancy can be also done in WordPress, and all the hosting company, they have the CDN, and everything that you mentioned is set up on the traditional CMS as well. It just also there are staging and QA environments that all these things are tested before they roll out, like a plugin can crash the site that you just mentioned is not realistic because they're tested before it goes to the production site. So it's not just the CMS that's going to crash with that. It's going to be prevented before it's rolled out. So that's not really a valid, strong opinion, strong case to think that the site can go down with the plugin updates or even the theme updates. So if you have set up the development team and development workflow with the QA workflow correctly, that's not going to happen, and it's going to save time as well because you don't for the headless you actually can't preview. So that's probably one of the biggest issues that one of our old clients did not want to continue on headless and come back to the traditional CMS because you can't preview, so you can't test. So that actually gives more tendency to have an error and then the site to crash. And even some of the times that the contents are cached too much in Contentful, so it's not going to update the correct the edits to the actual site. Oh, let me finish. You're not going to get the actual
Really like to talk
quickly. So all the things that you said, it's like it's only when it worked correctly, but also traditional CMS, if it's set up correctly, it's going to save time and the resources, and also the ability to update the content faster and more reliably. You can talk now.
Thanks for laying that out. You're making a strong case, and I love the pushback. You're absolutely right that a well-configured traditional CMS like WordPress, with proper staging, QA environments, and testing workflows, can avoid disasters like plugin or theme update crashes. And your point about previewing content and caching issues in headless CMS, like with Content Temple, is a real concern for some teams. Let's dive into these and keep the debate lively. First, on your point about traditional CMS reliability, I hear you that with solid dev workflows, testing plugins and staging, using CDNs, and leveraging good hosting, you can make WordPress or Drupal pretty robust. A media publisher with a disciplined team can push updates safely, and CDNs like Cloudflare or WP Engine's built-in caching can match headless in terms of speed and uptime. That's fair, and I'll concede that a tightly run traditional CMS setup can be stable and fast for a single site or even a couple of platforms. But here's where I think headless still pulls ahead for media publishers: scale and flexibility across multiple channels. With WordPress, even with great workflows, you're often tied to its ecosystem. Want to push content to a new mobile app, a smart TV, or an API-driven newsletter system? You'll likely need custom plugins or heavy dev work to adapt the monolithic structure, and each new channel adds complexity. Headless CMS, by design, serves content via APIs to any front end, so adding a new platform
Development.
hooking up a new front end to the same API. That's a time saver when you're a publisher juggling web, apps, and emerging tech.
But hold on a second. You're talking really long, so let's break it down. That the same development that you need to do to have all this API feed into a different system is going to be the same thing for the headless setup too, because that has to be custom built on the headless setup, the front end as well as all the other channels, Internet of Things or whatever. We have built Internet of Things with WordPress CMS before, just using API, and it's feeding into a different system like the videos or VR and the different contents like that. So any customization that's done with the traditional CMA to feed into the other system applies to headless as well.
You're bringing the heat, and I'm here for it. I'll keep this tighter. You're spot on that building custom APIs for WordPress to feed IoT, VR, or other systems is doable, and it mirrors the front-end work needed for headless CMS. Both require dev effort to connect new channels. But here's my push. With a traditional CMS like WordPress, those APIs are often bolted on, requiring custom plugins or workarounds that can get clunky, especially as you scale across multiple platforms. Each new channel might mean tweaking the backend, which risks breaking your core site if not handled with extreme care.
Actually, no, that's not the case, because if you were going to do the headless as well, that you have to build the custom API to make sure that it's at the right format that the end receiving end is expecting. So it's the same amount of work.
You're making a sharp point here, and I respect the pushback. You're saying that building custom APIs for a headless CMS to match the format expected by different platforms like IoT, VR, or apps takes just as much work as doing the same with a traditional CMS like WordPress. Fair enough. Both setups need custom work to format API outputs for specific endpoints. But let me counter with why I think headless still has an edge for media publishers. With a headless CMS, the API is the core of the system designed from the ground up to deliver structured content in a flexible, standardized way, like JSON via REST or GraphQL. This means the heavy lifting is often done by the CMS itself, providing clean, reusable endpoints that devs can query for any platform. For example, with a headless CMS like Strapi, you define your content model once, and the API auto-generates endpoints that can be easily adapted to any front end with minimal tweaking. Say, a quick transformation layer to match a VR app's needs. With WordPress, you can absolutely build APIs, often using plugins like WP REST API, but you're retrofitting a system built with web pages, not multi-channel delivery. This can
I think we're gonna have to drop this one. I don't think
Hold on a second.
API scale without bogging down your site.
Hold on a second.
In a real-world case, a media company like Vox uses a headless setup to push content to web, apps, and new.
I paused it.
I think that they need to be demoted to a developer from senior developer.
As a senior developer. But the thing is, like, everything they're saying, it's so complicated. Like, she's basing on this fact that it's going to go to all these different channels, but then in reality, a lot of the headless sites that they did it because of the headless.
Well, even if it does, though, like she tried to say that it's more like I think we're getting down to the point where it's the same, other than developers, to keep developers happy, you need a headless system.
Right.
And then, like, she hasn't even brought up the whole idea of if you're pulling in from other places, like that's the bigger kind of argument. Like if you have an e-commerce site or something like that, where you're pulling in and displaying content, that's the bigger argument I've heard. But even that can be done. Like we've done that in WordPress. Right. You just pull it in and then display it in a WordPress template. And the whole idea of like, oh, it's a WordPress or ecosystem of developers or Drupal ecosystem of developers, like, well, the front end is the front end. Like you can build it in any kind of templating language you want.
Right.
You could have a React kind of and render it, like if you have a deployment system, that's not traditional headless, but it still allows you to do all the fun tools of whatever kind of programming language you want to do. You don't have to write in PHP.
Yeah. And also like what she's saying, that all this headless things, Strappy and then was it Netify, those are the clients that who actually were there and wanted to come back to WordPress or other CMS.
Still, yeah, they're now migrating back onto WordPress because they were convinced by a dev-led agency, let's say, that that's the way to go. You're going to get performance. You're going to get you're going to be able to do anything you want. And the reality is they want to publish content. They want to preview it. They want to be able to view it in the editor as it's supposed to be rendered. And they don't want days and days of development for every tiny little feature increment.
Right. So like they have to develop the actual front end based on what they want instead of hands off, and you just kind of like have a templates that actually feed in.
Yeah. I mean, I think this kind of was not a fail, but kind of a fail. Like I was really hoping, like I want to find someone that can actually give us a true, like valid reasoning for headless is the way to go. It's going to cut your costs somehow. It's going to increase the amount of functionality that you're going to have. But I think the reality is it's web development, and whether you're doing some other programming language in a multi-architecture kind of solution, which is, I guess, headless or decoupled, or on WordPress, you end up being able to build the same thing. Right. Like yes, if you want to keep your developers happy and they don't want to do WordPress development, then go ahead and invest in the year-long project to build out a headless project, migrate off of WordPress on the front end for some reason, having the same exact thing you had before, and you spend a year, let's say, could be 6 months, whatever it is, doing that instead of actually building something that's going to increase something. Like you could increase performance in 6 months and actually have a win that's now scalable and actually you can build off of, or you can build the same thing. Like that's my generalized argument of people that are moving into headless, is like you're investing in things that aren't actually giving you anything short term.
I mean, I think
even the long term, like by the time you make those developers happy, they're probably left anyways. Right?
That's true.
Like they want to do something else.
That they can make is that if the system that they need to fit in is like just like that, she kind of mentioned that if it's multi-channel, that you have to fit into so many different places that it's not just going to be websites, and I get that, but it's also not headless. It's just decoupled, and you just make the API endpoint to feed in those contents into it. We've done that with all the different sites, and we have built different things. Like I mentioned, we feed into the video screen, we fit into the VR content, we fit into like a different thing than the website. It all needed to be custom API that we need to just build, which is needed if it's going to go to headless anyway. But so for those companies that are really looking to do all this different type of use cases, I don't know if it's like you call it an application, like all different types of media or I don't know, what are the things, like it's channels, then it might make sense to do headless to handle all of that. But for a simple website, or if not just a simple website, if you're just doing it on the website, it's overkill.
Yeah. I mean, I think again, I was kind of hoping to get some extra new material. I pitched. Now I'm going to get to speak on this a couple of times this summer. Around both Drupal, WordPress, looking at headless. Again, I'm willing to take an open kind of see if it's going to be performant, but I've been doing quote unquote headless on Drupal and WordPress since the beginning, like building for mobile apps, building for pulling it into other systems. Like that's always been the case. Like
they just
that's fine,
yeah.
But it's always been faster rather than building this other front end to just build it in the PHP templates and put whatever kind of front end JavaScript languages you want. Not full on Next or things like that, but you can, like that's going headless. But if you do it in rendering and pulling in assets, pulling in components with React components, you can do all that in a coupled system in both WordPress and Drupal. You need a little bit of PHP knowledge or a little bit of templating experience, but you can do it in whatever language you want, essentially,
Yeah.
or language you should be doing.
Anyways, this debate, it was, like you said, it's a very just scraping the information, there's a marketing information that she could get, but it's not really valid. It's because all those things, all those points that she made can be valid in different situations, but not necessarily in a common website. So, unfortunately, she didn't convince me.
I'm definitely not convinced yet. I can be convinced, I think. I mean, show me how it's going to be more performant, or actually reduce time for site development. But I don't know how you reduce site development unless there's an open source version of rendering. Let's say, like if someone develops the headless version, like the front end headless version of WordPress, of Drupal, and that becomes a thing that's maintained, then you start to get some scale and some cost reductions. And then it becomes interesting. But until then, if you're custom developing that and then having to custom develop previews, like, I don't know how that ever becomes like not cost prohibitive.
Yeah, and also she's overlooking the editorial cost, because like all the delays that people might not know, because non-technical people might not know why it's not updating right away, because it's heavily cached, and then you have to bust the cache every time you actually deploy the API or the content updates. That might not happen correctly unless you set up. You might have to go to all this filtering and the logic to set up that's done correctly. So that's also an overhead too, and there's a lot of breaking point on that too. So editorial time and frustration will be doubled or tripled with this headless system, and that's something that's real, because like they need to pump out data, especially the big media, enterprise level digital media companies. They push out contents frequently throughout the day, and if you don't see the updates going right away, that's very frustrating, and then it's going to be a bottleneck for them. So that's also
and knowing and being able to preview, not just preview, just rendering it in the admin the way it's supposed to be rendered.
You can validate your content.
Well, the thing is, you can build that. Like, you can build that in some in open source CMSs that are not WordPress, for whatever. Like, if you want to go that approach, there are a few new ones that are JavaScript based, but like Contentful, Strappy, like the SaaS versions, those are form based. You can kind of drag and drop stuff. That's fine, but you have to then build the preview link to then see it and then hope that it's working right. Like you said, the caching is actually clearing on up, and then publishing, and then hoping. Like, it's not a publish and like instant. You're either pulling or pushing, and those are going to fail. Like, they fail all the time. It's an HTTP request in the end. It's built to fail.
Right. So like the Contentful 2, I remember the Contentful one that we migrated over to just regular WordPress was, they couldn't see the preview. There is a preview, but she didn't even know about it initially, the editor, and then on the logging door. When they push it, there's this whole delay because it's pulling from the preview site. And then it was built on like based on Laravel, I think it was for the client. And it has to be queued and then pulled in, and it's not consistently set up and how long it's going to take, and it's hit and miss. And depending on when it's getting queued, the time is not consistent. Like, so like if the queue setup was like 5 minutes, it's not always 5 minutes. It depends on where in the 5 minutes it was queued. It adds up. So like it was very difficult, and she has to wait, but it doesn't come up, and then she's keep clicking the button. Every time she clicked the button, it's re-queued, and it was a disaster to just get to like one word change. She had a typo, and she wanted to just change that word, and it took forever for her to even preview it. And then during the time she was pushing it too many times, it broke the link, and the preview wouldn't work. So there's a disaster going on. And for the preview site, they have to custom build the preview site just to have them preview the content, which is also an overkill. So all in all, it just added so much more layers of development time as well as editor's time.
Yeah. So. All right. Well, I think what we found is we actually need someone that's actually knowledgeable about decoupled systems to argue this and debate with.
Then the AI.
And we can come up with, the real reasons that people actually push for this. Because I've seen the reasoning. People say it. They say all the things she said, and they're all marketing material that you can pull off websites. Right. I don't know that any of them are truly validated, to be honest. They're all based on case studies that people only tell about the things that they want people to know about. And that gets you to hire people to do the headless implementations or hire more developers to do it. Maybe AI just does it now. I don't know. Maybe we should get AI to do all headless implementations. That'd be interesting.
Yeah. We can try that next time and see if they can build
see if we can get something built.
Yeah, and it's more performant than the traditional CMS.
Yeah, let's get Cursor to replicate a WordPress site with headless. Let's see how that works after it blows up.
Yeah, we'll try that definitely.
Well, I would say cheers to at least this time you didn't throw all your drink all over the counter.
I'm going to edit this out. But unfortunately, Grok, you couldn't convince us. So.
Not me.
Yep, not me either. Anywho, that was interesting. All right then. Till next time. Bye.